Everyone, thank you for coming. Thank you for showing up. Hope you've had a good day and you're relaxed and in a very hungry mind because today's conversation or today's topic is very interesting to say the least. And it's been the hub of a lot of argument and a lot of debate for quite a while now. And I wouldn't think of anyone else more equipped to speak to us about it than Dr. Zakia Salime. She's an associate professor of sociology and gender studies at Rutgers. That's a difficult name. How do you say that again? Rutgers, yes, University in New Jersey. She taught at Yale University in 2017, and she also was a visiting professor at Paris 8 University. And today, we'll try to get as much from her as possible and create a very interesting topic around, create an interesting conversation around feminism and Islam. So the first question that I think most people would want the answer to is just why exactly this topic and why exactly this book?
Thank you so much, and thank you for showing up this late. I know that everyone is tired, but I want to make sure that everyone is comfortable with English here. Is it the case for everyone? Okay, because I don't want to leave anybody out. So, why writing this book? First of all, this book has two lives. I gave it two lives. The first life was in the United States when I published it in English, and that was in 2011. And its second life is in 2023, when I decided to translate it into Arabic to make it available for students and for Moroccans and people who do not necessarily read or enjoy reading English. So I wanted to actually speak about the second life, but I will first speak about the first life. And the first life, how did it start? It started with me being involved with the women's movement in Morocco. And that happened between 1995 and 2000 when I decided to go to the United States to pursue a PhD. I did have what we used to call doctorat de troisième cycle from France. I came back to Morocco. I taught at the university, and then at some point I decided to do something else, which is, like learning English, writing in English. So I got to the university in the US in 1999. Everything was just fine, like beautiful. Everything was fine, easy. I had scholarship, it was fine. And then 9/11 happened. And then it became a different world, right? And then I found myself in the middle of a controversy. And with crowds, and this is really academia. I'm not even talking about the ordinary Americans. I'm talking about the academic setting, in which the same morning during which that thing happened, I met with one of my professors in the hallway, and I did not know what was happening because I was in a classroom. I had no idea what was happening, and I'm like, "How are you doing?" So he looked at me and he said, How can you ask me this question with what is happening? And I'm like, oh, I am a student, he's a professor, right? So I didn't know how to react, and I didn't know what happened. So I ran to the student lounge, and we have like a student, and I said, well, what's happening? They told me, oh, you didn't know? What happened. And that's something that really pushed me to rethink about what I wanted to do in the United States, because initially what I wanted to do was to write the history of the women's movement in Morocco. For those of you who are familiar with the U.S. academia, with the U.S. Academy, we have a lot of studies on Egypt. We have a lot of studies on Turkey. We have a lot of studies on Iran. But there was nothing, like near to nothing about the women's movement in Morocco. And to me, the women's movement is not only like the restricted perception or conception we have of feminism as like the feminist movement. The women's movement to me started as I always tell them that my feminism started at home, and I didn't learn about feminism in school, but really with the women who were around me, and with their strength, their resilience. I am from a family of migrants, so like my grandmother, and I wrote about that. My grandmother migrated from the Tafilelt sometime in the 30s, and she took 4 kids with her and ran away from patriarchy. I do not like this word, but she ran away from the authority of the uncle when she lost her husband. And can you imagine, like it is the conditions of colonialism, famine, all kinds of and she left Tafilel to face 400 and something kilometers away. How did she do that? So I was surrounded with really powerful women, and I have here in the audience my teacher, Amina Matullah, who is really a powerful nature. And so these are the women who were around me. So what I was hearing in the news had nothing to do with what I experienced in my life. So I decided to write the history of that. I decided to write about the feminist movement, about the women's movement, and create an archive of the discourses, the spaces, the people, the claims, the demands. So this happened as I was thinking about, okay, what am I going to study? Even though I went there thinking I'm going to write something about the women's movement. And the second event that marked my academic career and life was the 2 marches. So I'm talking to a public who knows what I'm talking about. I know that the youngest generation maybe are little kind of, not necessarily aware of the real dynamics and struggles that we were faced with. So the second event was the 2 marches. The 2 marches, the one in Rabat in March 2000, and the one in Casablanca, March 2000 also. I will talk about this later, but this was represented by the news and by the media as for and against. So there was the feminist march that was for the governmental plan for the integration of women into development. And the march in Casablanca was a march of the Islamist men, Islamist parties. At that point, we had one party, Al-Adala wa Tanmiya, but Al-Adl Ihsan was very much involved also in the organization. And these two marches were represented as for and against. And I wanted to know more. I wanted to understand from my own perspective as somebody who has been involved with the women's movement, who has been involved with the spaces that Fatima Marnisi created, even though she wasn't my professor. I was in Fes, she was in Rabat, but she created all these spaces, and she actually accompanied the creation, the birth of something like Tmania Mars, the journal Tmania Mars, if you know what it is. And she accompanied the birth of a lot of NGOs. She accompanied the birth of a lot of initiatives. So that's kind of the school that I had, which was my extracurriculum learning. I wanted to relate that in my writing. But then the Casablanca March happened, and it was like I couldn't comprehend how women would be opposed to women's rights, because it was actually portrayed in a very simplistic way, this way, that there are a bunch of women who were against women's rights and a bunch of women who were for women's rights. I was not as satisfied, and I wanted to learn more. So my book became not about the feminist movement, not about Islam, but it became about the dynamics of interactions between the feminist movement and the Islamist movement. But even with the Islam, when I was talking to my feminist friends, they were telling me, oh, you don't need to speak to Islamist women. I mean, they have no particular agenda. They're just man followers. They have nothing to tell you. You are wasting your time. You're going to waste your time. I say, yeah, I want to waste my time. I'm a sociologist. I have all the time. I have all the time. So I started to talk to women who are members of the Islamist movement, because we have one party and one movement, so I can say parties. And actually what I learned was really mind-blowing for me, because I had no connection, and I'm saying it is a confession, I had no connection to the Islamist movement. I had no connection to women within the Islamist movement. At the same time, I did not have any preconceived notion of them being smart or less smart than me or than other people. So I started to speak to them, to talk to them, and I really, as I said, I needed to completely change the paradigm, because the paradigm, even conceptually and intellectually, for all the books that were written about this movement, the women's movement in the Middle East, these books were not dealing with the kind of intersection that I created, because I wanted to see what was happening at this intersection. And the intersection is the discourses, the dynamics of push and pull, the dynamics of who is responding to who and how are they responding. And beyond those dynamics, what I discover, what I wanted to see is, okay, if the women's movement, like the feminist movement, was changing the laws, the other women, what were they doing? What were they changing? And I'm going to give you the answer, not my answer, but the answer of one major feminist activist, pretty well known, a friend of mine, who told me the following. She told me, when we were trying to change the law, the Islamist women were changing their husbands, which we couldn't do. And that to me was a powerful statement, because thanks to Islam and thanks to this kind of positioning, right? This kind of positioning as da'iyah, they were really free to travel, to disappear from their home for 3-4 days because they are doing da'wah. And these are things we saw also in other contexts. But in the Moroccan context, I must say that probably what he discovered comparing Morocco to even to Egypt or to Jordan, or our Islamist women were much more advanced in terms of even their understanding and interpretation of religion. So, and this kind of friendly, I'm going to give you the chance to ask questions, but this kind of framing was really new, was pretty new, and this is why my book made it to most graduate programs in the United States. And I'm talking about people who work on the Middle East, but also people who do not work on the Middle East. I was invited everywhere because there was a need for understanding Islam and Muslim women, and I felt lucky and at the right place that it was me and my interpretation that they were listening to. You see what I'm saying? It's not Hirsi Ali against Hirsi Ali and that stuff. It was me, and also as an ethnographer, I had also the kind of duty to disseminate a certain notion, because all the Islamist movement, I spoke to Nadia Yassin, I don't want to keep citing names, but I spoke to everyone, all the women who were in the parliament, the ministers, I spoke to all of them. They were not at that point ministers, but a lot of them were already in the parliament when I was speaking to them, but a lot of them were already also teaching in mosques, because they were appointed to mosques, right, Murshidat. And this did not happen overnight. So when you sit with them and you see the process and the pain and the challenges they have to face in order to be even admitted to mosques, it's pretty impressive. Okay, I think I said enough about the Islamist movement. I can say something about the feminist movement later, but if you have questions for me. I don't know if you prepared questions.
I do. I just want to clarify a few things. 'Cause, you mentioned something interesting. You said that while the feminist movement was trying to change the law, the Islamist movement, women were changing their husbands. I didn't. What does that actually mean? Like, how does that impact the outcome of it? And if you could just elaborate on that, because I felt a little lost there.
What she meant was all the freedom of movement that the women had, but also the fact that they changed the dynamics in the home, because when she leaves the kids to the husband to take care of. So he was taking care of the kids. He was taking care of the. It might be a very simplistic way, because we do know that women make up for other women, and that's. What I mean is, people have help in the house, and usually it's other women who perform that help. But still, it was not. This change did not only happen in the home, it also happened within the Islamist movement. Inside of the movement, there were a lot of changes happening because the women were claiming positions of power, and they actually gained those positions of power. So these are some of the changes that she was pointing to. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of positions of power, you mentioned that you do not like the term patriarchy. I'm a little bit intrigued. Okay, I'll just state in general what I'm trying to represent. I'm a male person, so today I'll represent all the ignorant male perspective that is willing to learn. So if my questions seem a little bit basic, that's the perspective that I come from, as a perspective of blissful ignorance that is willing to come out of that ignorance. So if you could elaborate on the trouble you have with the term patriarchy, if you want.
So one of the politics we follow as women, as Muslim women, because I consider myself Muslim woman, as a Muslim women in the West, living in the West, and with a certain consciousness about who we are, how we are perceived, and also the consciousness about how what we write and say can be turned against us and our societies. So we don't want to give them more reasons to use we call the rescue motive. And we are very careful about not just repeating the way they are speaking about when they speak about patriarchy to them. Patriarchy is all about oppression and oppressive power. I'm not denying the fact that patriarchy exists. Of course it does. All societies are patriarchal, or most of them. But what I am aware of is the limiting and the limited. I'm gonna give you an example with some of what women in the Middle East have produced, which is like phenomenal. There was Suad Joseph, for example, a Lebanese senior scholar and feminist. She said the following. She said, if you want, because sometimes they say, why are women so attached to the family, for example, right? Why are they so attached to the community? Why are they so attached to tradition? And she told them, if you don't want them to be so much attached to their community or tradition, well, give them another perspective. Give them something else. Give them something else. What do you have to offer to them? Because if you take somebody who is who is in any, and I don't want to do the classism but there are a lot of women who can detach from the family because they only have that kind of protection. They don't have any other protection. And I know that protection is a band is a banned term for many feminists. They don't like this term. Like, what do you mean, protecting women? But actually, women do need protection. And if they are not protected in terms of, when I say women need protection, I don't mean that we are weak and we need protection. I mean that in certain circumstances, women actually do need protection because they're the first victims of poverty, of wars. Most of the refugees are women. Most of the poorest families, and this by statistics, and it's global. It's not just, I'm not talking about Morocco. The poorest families are the families headed by women. So, and this means that, okay, if you tell them, well, patriarchy is bad in the sense of oppression or in the sense of control, what are you giving them instead of that? So I'm not defending patriarchy, but I'm just saying that in patriarchy, we should be looking at what kind of, and I'm going to turn myself into a functionalist, what kind of function does patriarchy do in women's lives? What kind of women? What category of women? Because there is no such a thing as a woman or women.
Yeah. The idea of feminists or feminism rejecting the idea of protection, but it's the mark of a progressive and developed society that it creates a place where women are safe and protected so that they can engage in public discourse, that they have it's creating a field, or it's creating a place of safety and protection, not because they need, but because that's what society should be like. It's not like saying, okay, well, you want to go out and have your positions of power, but, well, you don't have the necessary protection or necessary safety to engage in such political or civil discourse. So creating that society means that women could actually flourish in it. You mentioned that the gap that you're interested in studying is the intersection between Islamism, or the Islamist movement, and the feminist movement. I was wondering, what are the ways, and what is this relationship, what is this dichotomy between the Islamist movement and the feminist movement? Do they go hand in hand? Do they contradict each other in some ways? If so, what are the best ways that they can come together and serve a certain purpose for women's rights in general?
Well, when I was doing, because I want to stick with like my data and what I discovered when I was writing this book. So when I was writing the book, and I was doing my research, there was mainly no dialogue. Like formally, there was nothing. They were operating in parallel to each other. How? Oh, yeah, I said this before you get here. So it was between 2002 and 2004, between 2000 and 2004, 4 years. Yeah. So there was no dialogue, but the beauty of ethnography is to actually find it, is find where there was dialogue. And dialogue was not like face-to-face. It was in the writing, it was in the spaces, and it was around the idea of the project of reforming the Mudawwana. At that point, the way we called it Mudawwana al-Ahwal al-Shakhsiyya. So that was the main site of interaction, is that kind of reform. So how shall it be reformed? Shall it be reformed at all? Who started the debate? What are because it was clear that the feminists were on the news. So they were on the news. They published a lot, like thousands of pages, about the women's status in Morocco, the women condition, like a lot. And but the Islamists were kind of, we couldn't find women's voices. So I had to go and look for the very first writing that I could find, and they were in newspapers. They were in newspapers, before they start to write in Al-Furqan, in those like platforms of the Ministry of Al-Awqaf. And this writing to me were important because, of course, I'm providing a feminist reading of this. I'm saying that it was the women it was the Islamist women who started the debate against the reform of family law, and who started to also require from the leadership of the Islamist movement require positions of power, because they were telling them the reason that these women, these others, are taking the floor is because you guys are not allowing us to take the floor. And therefore, we've got to take the floor. We've got to be able to speak back to them, women to women. And that lasted for a few years before the women started to actually occupy positions of power. There was like in العدالة والتنمية, there was only one woman, حركة التوحيد والإصلاح. There was only one woman who was on the executive committee, but in the structures of the movement, one third of the membership was composed of women, and of course, and that number kept growing. One of the probably the shortcoming of Islamist women were that they did not really write. They did not write a lot. They did not write. Nadia Yassin wrote a book, but the other did not really write. I saw a book by Khadija Mufid a few years ago, but the other did not write, or at least I didn't know. So I kept kind of pushing them. Please write down your experiences, because it's important to document this experience. Did I forget something?
Not that I could.
No, in your question.
Just basically, if there are any aspects of these two movements in which they might contradict each other.
Yeah, I mean they were contradicting each other all the time. But what I showed in the book was how they both changed in the course of these interactions. How they both changed. I called it the Islamization of the feminist and the feminization of the Islamist. That's how I called it, because there was a lot of changes in the. I'm going to give you one example. So. After the marches, the two marches, the king appointed a council to اللجنة الوطنية من أجل تعديل مدونة الأحوال الشخصية, and all the NGOs, because all these people were actually organized as NGOs, all of them had to appear before that lejna and lobby for their case, like the Islamist and the feminist. And here, the feminists, most of them were really very anxious because they knew that they were going to appear before a lejna composed of mainly ulama, people who speak excellent Arabic. A lot of my feminist friends were rather bilingual at best, but francophone at at worst. And they had to come up with a language, and that language had to also become had to be based on arguments from the Sharia. This is why my book is also called Sharia, on the Sharia. And here something amazing happened, which was that the feminists found some ulama, found support with some ulama, like Al-Khamlishi, for example. I'm going to forget some names, but they found ulama to support them and to help them with arguments and to help them. And they started to read the history of Islam also. They started to read the history. They started to read the texts in order to be able to. Not all of them did that. Some of them were telling me, no, we hold the universal human rights, and that's what we do. We'll take them. That's what we are taking with us. We have no business speaking about Sharia. We are not competent in that, and that's not our thing. But others decided that they have to do that. So that work is what I call the Islamization. It doesn't mean they became Islamist, but it means that they started to get closer to where the others are in order to gain some space. Yeah. And the other example, and I'm gonna, it's up to you to do it, tell me what to do.
Go ahead.
The other example is after the Casablanca attacks, because I finished my book. My last chapter is really dealing with how did these two movements position themselves vis-a-vis the state, vis-a-vis Islam, vis-a-vis the public, after the Casablanca attacks in 2004, right? 3 or 4? 3 May. And it was really fascinating to see, because the feminists were saying, it's a caricature, but this is some of what was happening. We told you that if you do not control these people, this will happen. You didn't believe us. You didn't listen to us. So you have to listen to us, because we are the agents of modernity and progress. Islamist women said the following: we told you that women are the voices of moderation. You didn't listen to us. So if you want, we are the only ones who are capable and able to moderate the tone of the most radical voices in the Islamist movement. And for that, what we need access to mosques. We need access to al-majalis al-ilmiya. You remember that in 2004, after the Casablanca attacks, the king appointed 24 women to al-majalis al-ilmiya. And this did not happen. So what I'm doing as a feminist, I'm showing, and I want to leave you with this idea, I'm showing that we can actually read the history of contemporary Morocco through the women's movement. To me, that's extremely important, because we have a tendency to read the history from above, and we have a tendency to read the history through what men do, what they say, how they organize themselves. But we forget that there are forces that we don't see, not necessarily unless we look for them. And as a feminist, my job was to actually look for them, without having like a preconceived notion about like a veiled woman. Why is she oppressed? You know, I never knew that a veiled woman is. I mean, I never thought that a veiled woman was oppressed. But it wasn't my. I mean, you know, it wasn't important for me to even know or ask myself this question. But then politically engaged women and involved women in political Islam had a program, they had a plan, they had an agenda, and they followed that agenda to reach certain goals.
You mentioned it was an interesting idea that maybe the progress of feminism is through the reading of the history of the feminist Islamic movement. And maybe the way forward is also looking back. I was talking to a friend of mine, and she mentioned that throughout history there were a lot of scientific papers who were written by women, but the men took the credit because the women did not have the access to publishing houses. So what they did is that they picked like pseudonyms, or they chose the names of their husbands to get those papers published. So maybe the advancements of feminism in Morocco is through going back and knowing what the hidden history of the Islamic movement. Do you think the creation of the Mudawana, when it first was created, do you think it was more of the effect of which was just more symbolic, or whether it actually had some substantial effects?
Get the question.
When Mudawana al-Usra was first introduced...
Into the music.
Oh, we all are. It's very hard not to dance. When Mudawana al-Usra was first introduced, and it was created.
In 58.
Yes. It sort of gave a lot of promises of liberation, so a lot of promises of rights, or not really? How so? Maybe my reading. That's why I said it's a place of ignorance. I'm coming from a place of ignorance, so I'm here to be taught, and I'm sure that the rest will come. So why do you disagree that the fact that it was not promising some sort of liberation or progress for women?
I'm trying to get away from your question. And I'm going to find a way. So you mentioned publishing, and I really want to say something about feminist publishing in Morocco. And I prefer to speak about contemporary time. One space in which these dynamics, especially on the feminist side, were happening was Le Fennec Publishing by Leila Chawni. And Leila Chawni was the very first, one of the first feminist publishing houses in the region. I don't want to say in Africa, probably yes, also, or in the world. And her space, Le Fennec, was not only a publishing home, it was also a space for debate and conversation in which we were all invited and welcomed. So in Morocco, I would say that we were very lucky to have a feminist press. She was not just, publishing stuff written by women, she was publishing everyone. But that was the first feminist press, and Leila Chawni, if you speak to her, she's going to tell you that she spoke to Fatima Marnissi at one of the, actually, La Foire book exhibits. And she asked Fatima Marnissi to give her, she was working for a publishing press, not her own. And she asked Fatima Marnissi, we wanted to create a Moroccan version of your books that would be accessible to people financially. Fatima Marnissi looked at her and said, who are you working for? And she said, this press. And she said, well, I suggest you create your own press. And it would be a feminist press. And that's how it started. So these spaces were extremely important because they spoke to a movement as if they were happening in the air, but I want to ground them in particular spaces. Feminist groups, I want to say something that is, I think, extremely important to know, is that feminist groups did not want to get any funding from outside of Morocco about the dynamics of change in the Mudawwana. They refused. It was a decision, because they said if we get funding from outside, they already call us all the names. If we get funding from outside, it will be even worse. So for the Mudawwana, there was a policy of not taking anything, especially not from the Americans. So the reason I'm saying this is because sometimes people think about the feminists and they're agents of the West and all of that, and it's very simplistic because people were actually thinking about the country. They were thinking about the interests of the country, and they were thinking about not dealing with funding, especially from the United States at that stage, because of the war on Iraq, because of Palestine, because of many of these, still what we are dealing with even now. On the other hand, the Islamist movement, or the Islamist women, were working in much more comfortable conditions because they had the parties behind them, and they had the structures that were already there for them. While the feminists had to invent everything. They had to find the structures, they had to find the places, they had to find the funds, they had to also deal with the Islamist press. which was very present. I remember one of my friends, she told me that they were, after the march, the feminists started to organize what they call the caravan. The caravan, they went all over Morocco, everywhere in Morocco, everywhere. And the caravan were you know, like it's a like a do we say convoy, right? Like a convoy, with doctors, with lawyers, with judges. They were taking them to the most remote places in Morocco. And one of my friends told me that each time we knocked at at a door, we were told that you know, الفقيه Jama has already spread the word that you shouldn't talk to them, you shouldn't see them, you shouldn't open to them, you should have no interaction with these women because they are atheists, they are agents of the West, they are, you know, all of that stuff that, you know, and there are terms I can't pronounce here. And these are the conditions. I want people to know that these are the conditions in which these people were working. Whether we agree with you know, what they did, what they didn't do in terms of changes, reform, is it good, is it bad? That's a different story. But what I'm saying is that they believed in something, and they were very upset in March 2000 when they discovered that the women they were mentoring actually marched with the Islamists, because the feminist movement created a lot of les centres d'écoute de femmes victimes de violence, and they were organizing a lot of women, giving workshops, helping in multiple ways. But when the choice came to where you go, they walked with the Islamists, and that was the most shocking. It was a trauma for a lot of them. Like, why would they do that? Like, they betrayed us. And this is when they say, no, it's not a betrayal. We did not speak the right language. So let's try, organize the caravan. So the caravan came as, like, let's get closer to the masses, to the people.
Sure, we still have 15 minutes. Just one thing that I would want to get clear is that maybe that the reason, one of the outcomes of the feminist movement finding it very difficult to operate in Morocco and sort of moving or holding hands with the Islamist movement, would it be the case that that's why the concept of Islamic feminism was created, some kind of a joint operation between the two? If so, what is different from like Western feminism and Islamic feminism? Is there some kind of a difference there?
I want to precise something, that the feminist or feminist activists did not find it difficult to operate in Morocco at all. Morocco was actually the place where Tunisian, Algerian women who could not operate in their homeland because of the problems in Algeria. We knew what was happening. And Tunisia also under Ben Ali, who controlled completely the associative life of women. So all the meetings were happening in Le Fennec, and all the books that were created, like Maghreb 2000, a lot of books, were created with Algerian women, Tunisian women coming to Morocco to work with Moroccan women for the same purpose, which is the reform of family law. So it was not difficult. What I was saying is that the structures were not like there already for them. They had to create those structures, but it was not difficult to work. It was difficult to convey a message because of the power of the Islamists at that point, movement.
Yeah, that was exactly what I meant. It's just it was harder for them to convey the message Just back to the question, whether you think that there are some differences between Islamic feminism and feminism in general, or Western feminism.
Yeah, so Islamic feminism was born through the work of an Iranian feminist who coined the term the first time. And then it was adopted by many people who wanted to forge a space for feminism within Islam. It's a long story. Women have been working on this in all Islamic countries. And created a lot of structures. There are those who refuse completely to be called feminist. Some people were even calling Fatima Mernissi an Islamic feminist, and Fatima Mernissi never called herself an Islamic feminist. So it's a term that was used. Yes, you're right. Kind of imagined to create this possibility, like feminism is possible within Islam, and Islam is feminist, is friendly.
It's sort of negating the idea that Islam was created to oppress women rather than
exactly. So Islamic feminists are actually responding to both the kind of the conservative forces who are saying there is no feminism, Islam cannot be feminist, like in the sense of we don't need feminism in Islam. That's the discourse is not like Islam is not feminist, but the discourse is Islam is already feminist and therefore we don't need feminism. That's the discourse, right? Or Islam cannot accommodate women's rights. So you have this kind of opposite.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that was spoken about in Shahrazad Goes West. It's the idea that, there's no place for feminism in Islam, but it's rather, as an example, is the harim, the idea of the harim in Shahrazad Goes West. What was striking for me is that, the idea was not actually born within the Islamic society, but it was just more a projection of Western society towards the East and what they thought of as our culture, they thought of as the tradition, I think. Yeah. Yes, if anyone has a question.
Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. It makes me feel that I'm so sorry that I have not yet read your book, but I will. I have just a question. Do you relate in any way to the work of Saba Mahmoud, who did this wonderful book called Politics of Piety, and she works on Egyptian Islamists?
At a time? I don't know how to. What do you mean by collect each question?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being with us here today. And you said that feminists tried to read Sharia in order to refute Islamist women's arguments. My question is, did they only read in order to refute the Islamist women's arguments, or did they read to open up their minds and eventually have a better perspective of the Islamist movement? Because because you said they tried to read just in order to gain more space and more presence, recognition from ulama, because others had it. Also, I'm gonna bring you back to the first thing when you said, feminists said, when we were trying to change the law, Islamist women were changing their husbands, which we could never do. When they said that, did they say it with regret? Because they said they could never do it themselves. So is the legal change they pushed for, like, wasn't it the right way? Did they think they should have gone through a more microscopic way, like changing the families and people around you, instead of just pushing for changing the law, which really didn't amount to big things, in my opinion. But those are my two questions. Thank you.
What is your definition of feminism? I know it's hard to find une définition unie du féminisme, et a fortiori Islamist feminists. So the definition is important.
Thank you. Hello. My name is Sarah, and I just want to express how happy I am to be here with you. You were one of the first writers, Moroccan writers, who wrote about feminism that I've read to when I was doing gender studies, so it's such a pleasure to see you here in the flesh. I identify as a feminist, and I will not tell you my definition of feminism. I think, for me, a feminist is a person, not a woman, not a man. It's a person who believes in a more egalitarian, non-discriminatory, because everyone has a definition of what is equality, a non-discriminatory world where men and women are given the same opportunities and chances and rights when it comes to power, resources, and knowledge. And that is inclusive for everyone. That is what a feminist is. Of course, there is a political and social aspect to it. People convening for a political and social change. That is basically what feminism is. Has nothing to do with everything that people try to stick to feminism. My question, of course, you're following everything that's happening now in Morocco. And I want to ask you whether there is hope, for the simple reason that I feel that feminist groups, and I'm even questioning the word movement in Morocco, feminism, have not been able to regenerate themselves and come up with a better strategy for this new reform of the family code, and we know how important it is. I know it's a huge discussion, but I know how important the family code is. So is there hope? Is there a way out? And what is the role really of rereading Islamic tradition in this perspective? Because the first argument that always comes up is the religion. So how can that be used as a Trojan horse in a good faith, not in a bad faith, in order to bring up a new agenda that advocates for gender equality in Morocco? Thank you.
I think we'll take one more. Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for your presentation. So I have a question that is not directly to your work. I just wanted, and you can decide whether to answer it or not. So I wanted to know if your work has been affected in any way under Trump administration. So, for instance, if your work has been censored, or if your department has experienced any budget cuts. So you can decide whether to answer it or not.
I adhere totally to the definition here, so I am not going to define feminism. Is there any hope, right? I want to start with the last one. I want to say that I have not been working on the question of reforming the Mudawana. I've been following from distance. And my current book, the book I'm writing now, has nothing to do with this. I'm working on the privatization of natural resources. So the materiality of women's lives in several regions in Morocco. I don't want to think in terms of hope, even though hope is a core notion in my current work. Because I think that change, social change, is always the result of tafa'ulat, of dynamics, of push and push, of discourse, of conversations, of conflict, agony, if we want to go to like Chantal Mouffe, agonistic debates. And that will never change. It's going to be the case everywhere and always. It's very difficult to speak about women's rights to, I don't want to say men, because in the feminist movement we did have men all the time with us. But it's difficult to shake the foundations of inequality because one side is benefiting from it, much more than the other side. And obviously those who are benefiting from it are going to hold on their power, right? And that's not only in Morocco, everywhere, because I'm not somebody who really thinks that in the West they have it all. No, I lived in the West. Oh, I lived in France, I lived in the United States. I have absolutely no illusion. What is important for women, this is my point of view, is the law. And this is why laws are extremely important. Because if you do not have a law against sexual harassment, for example, at the workplace, what do you do when you are harassed? What do you do? So we do need laws. Laws are extremely important. The absence of laws is a disaster. However, do laws do the work for us? No. You need them, but they don't do. Look at what's happening in Gaza, right? I mean, yeah, international law and court and criminal, right? But do we say we don't, laws are useless and therefore we shouldn't spend time trying to reform the laws? Or do we say we need to reform the laws, we need laws that protect everyone, and we need to do the work, which is necessary for making those laws effective, applied, which is work that women's movements were, feminist groups were training police officers, they were training judges, they were training lawyers in how they would deal when a woman is in front of them telling them, look what's happening to me, instead of turning a blind eye because he's a guy and because he's saying he's rather to rally with a guy than with the woman. We're not believed. When we cry, we're not believed. When we have pain, we are not believed. And these are, as I say, in the US, women are not believed, and black women are not believed. They're not taken care. Like their pain is not taken seriously by doctors. So, and this is where feminism and gender studies become crucial, because that's where we go and we look at what's happening much more closely. So yeah, laws are extremely important. Saba Mahmoud. Saba Mahmoud is a Pakistani woman who worked on the mosque movement in Egypt, and her book Politics of Piety came out in 2005 and created a complete shift in the paradigms of what we call agency, women's power, right? Nobody can now speak about Islam and women's movement or Muslim women in the US the way France is still doing it. Europe is still doing it. In the US, we are lucky that we had people like Saba Mahmoud, like Leila Abu Lughod, like myself, like many other women who have, as I say, populated the debate, the discourse, right? Is it a good term or not? بغيت نقول ملئنا, right? Because in French, popular, yeah.
Just a quick reminder that we're 30 seconds away.
Filled the debate. So they cannot talk about the veil as oppressive anymore. Nobody can do that in the US. They will laugh at you if you say, I'm talking about the academic setting. I'm not talking about the media. I'm not talking about Fox News or CNN. Right. So I think that research does change and laws are important. On
clock.
We are told to leave the room, so
yep.
I think.
Well,
so I have my book in Arabic. If you are interested, if not, it's fine. It's I just brought a few copies.
Yep. Encourage everyone to get the book, and thank you so much, Dr. Salim. Thank you. Zakia Salime. Yes.